Rain falls sideways in freezing sheets, and somewhere in the hills of Pennsylvania, a crew of men stand ankle-deep in cold mud, their hands raw, their backs screaming, hauling a stone the size of a barrel toward a half-finished road that seems to stretch on forever into the gray horizon. Their breath fogs in the icy air. A horse strains against its harness, hooves slipping in the muck, and a foreman shouts over the wind for the men to keep moving before the light fails completely. There are no engines here, no machines, no shortcuts, just muscle, rope, timber, and an unbearable weight pressing down on exhausted shoulders. How did they do it? How did anyone build a road, a real road, one that could carry wagons and armies and the future of a growing nation using nothing but hand tools and animal strength? To understand that, we have to go back to the very beginning, long before shovels ever touched American soil. Long before European settlers arrived, the land already carried its own network of paths. Indigenous nations across the continent had spent centuries walking the same routes, following ridgelines, river crossings, and natural gaps through mountains that made travel possible at all. These were not roads in the modern sense, but foot trails worn smooth by generations of moccasins, hooves, and travois poles. When colonists began pushing inland, they had little choice but to follow these same paths, because the alternative was hacking through untouched wilderness with an axe and a prayer. Many of America's earliest colonial roads, including stretches of what would later become major highways, began as these ancient indigenous trails, quietly absorbed into a new nation's infrastructure without much acknowledgement. As settlements grew, so did the demand for wider paths that could carry more than a single traveler on foot. Farmers needed to move grain to market. Militias needed to move men and supplies. Merchants needed reliable routes between towns. And so, colonial governments began requiring something that sounds almost unbelievable today: mandatory road labor. Under laws passed in colony after colony, ordinary landowners were required to contribute a set number of days each year clearing brush, felling trees, and leveling paths whether they wanted to or not. This was road duty, and it fell on farmers already exhausted from working their own land. Refusal meant fines. Compliance meant blistered hands and aching muscles added onto an already brutal workload. Picture a work gang assembled at dawn, men with axes slung over their shoulders, walking toward a stretch of forest that stood directly in the path of a planned road. The trees had to come down first, one by one, the rhythmic thud of steel biting into trunk after trunk echoing through the woods for hours. Once felled, the trunks were split, dragged aside with ox teams, and the stumps dug out with mattocks and crowbars, a task so grueling that some stumps took an entire day to remove. Where the ground turned soft and swampy, workers laid logs side by side across the mud, creating what became known as a corduroy road, named for its ridged, fabric-like appearance. Riding over a corduroy road was bone-jarring and miserable, but it was infinitely better than sinking a wagon axle-deep into a bog. Comment below if you've ever wondered just how much labor went into a single mile of early American road, because the numbers are staggering. And if this kind of hidden history fascinates you, this is exactly the kind of story this channel exists to tell. So consider subscribing before we go deeper into how these paths became true engineered roads. As the American population grew, dirt paths were no longer enough. Wagons loaded with goods needed firmer ground, and travelers demanded routes that would not disappear under every rainstorm. This is where private investment entered the picture through turnpike companies. Businesses granted the right to build and maintain a road in exchange for charging tolls at gates along the route. The word turnpike itself came from the pike, a long pole that blocked travelers until they paid their fee. These turnpikes represented one of the first major infrastructure investments in the young United States, and building them required real engineering knowledge, not just brute clearing. Surveyors walked the proposed routes first, using simple compasses and measuring chains to map out the most efficient path, accounting for hills, water crossings, and soil conditions. Engineers had learned, often through painful trial and error, that a road without proper drainage was doomed to fail. Water was the enemy of every road ever built because it softened foundations, washed away gravel, and turned solid ground into treacherous mud. So workers dug drainage ditches along both sides of the roadbed, angling them carefully so water would flow away rather than pool beneath the surface. The road itself was built with a slight crown in the middle, higher than the edges, allowing rain to run off naturally instead of collecting in the center. Building the roadbed itself was punishing, repetitive labor. Workers used shovels and mattocks to cut into hillsides and fill low areas, moving earth by the wheelbarrow load, hour after hour, day after day. Where the terrain demanded stone foundations, laborers broke apart quarried rock using sledgehammers, sometimes spending an entire day producing a single cartload of usable stone. This back-breaking work of stone breaking was so demanding that it was often assigned to hired laborers, immigrants desperate for work, and in some documented cases, enslaved individuals forced into the task without pay or choice. The history of American road building carries this uncomfortable weight, and honoring the achievement means acknowledging every hand that made it possible, whether free or forced. By the early 19th century, a revolutionary technique arrived from Scotland, developed by an engineer named John Loudon McAdam. His method, now known as macadam construction, involved layering crushed stone of specific graduated sizes, compacted tightly so that the weight of traffic itself would bind the stones together into a durable surface. American road builders adopted this technique eagerly, and teams of workers spent months breaking stone into precise, hand-measured sizes using small hammers, checking each piece against a ring gauge to ensure it fit before adding it to the layered road. Heavy stone rollers, sometimes pulled by teams of horses, pressed the crushed rock into place, compacting it into a surface strong enough to support the growing weight of American commerce. Every region presented its own brutal challenges. In the rocky terrain of New England, workers battled granite outcroppings that had to be broken apart piece by piece. In the swamps of the South, road builders fought against sinking ground and disease-carrying mosquitoes that spread illness through work camps. In the Appalachian Passes, crews carved roads directly into mountainsides, sometimes suspended on ropes above steep drops, chiseling away rock with hand tools while risking falls that could end in death. What kind of person willingly took on this life of grueling, dangerous labor? Let us know in the comments which challenge you think would have been the hardest to endure. Bridges presented their own engineering puzzle, since rivers could not simply be filled in or dug through. Timber bridge builders used mortise and tenon joints, carefully measured and cut by hand, assembling massive wooden trusses without a single nail in some early designs. These bridges had to withstand seasonal flooding, ice movement, and the constant vibration of wagon traffic, and their survival for decades stands as a testament to the precision of craftsmen working entirely without modern measuring tools. By the time asphalt paving machines finally arrived, America already possessed thousands of miles of roads built entirely by human hands and animal strength. Roads that had connected isolated farms to bustling cities, carried settlers westward, and stitched together a nation across mountains, rivers, and forests that seemed impossible to cross. Every mile represented thousands of hours of anonymous labor, countless blistered hands, broken backs, and quiet acts of endurance that history rarely remembers by name. The workers who built these roads left no monuments bearing their names, no statues, no plaques. Their legacy exists instead in the very shape of the land itself, in every route that still winds through the hills and valleys their labor first carved open. And somewhere in the memory of that same freezing rain, that same exhausted crew still stands in the mud, hauling that same impossible stone toward a road that seems to stretch on forever, unaware that the path beneath their feet would one day carry an entire nation forward.